This video describes the steps to prepare stool specimens to run on the VIDAS instrument using the VIDAS C. difficile Toxin A and B CDAB assay kit. At the end of this video, you should be able to prepare stool specimens to perform the VIDAS C. difficile Toxin A and B, also referred to as CDAB assay kit. The VIDAS instrument. VIDAS C. difficile Toxin A and B CDAB assay kit, part number 30118-01. Calibrated pipette with disposable tip to dispense 200 microliters, 300 microliters, and 1,000 microliters. Personal protective equipment including powderless disposable gloves, protective clothing, eye protection or face protection, vortex-type mixer, centrifuge capable of greater than or equal to 12,000 G, polypropylene or other appropriate centrifuge tubes for specimen dilution and centrifugation with at least 1.5 milliliter capacity, sample transfer pipettes used to measure appropriate quantity of stool sample for processing, applicator stick or loop. Stool specimens should be collected according to standard laboratory procedures and stored at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius for up to 3 days if not processed immediately. Refer to the package insert for additional storage conditions. Before we begin, it is critical that stool specimens be thoroughly mixed. Thorough mixing of stool specimens is essential to avoid incorrect results. Depending on the specimen received, the following steps should be taken to process the specimen. Let's begin with processing a liquid stool. For a liquid stool, begin by homogenizing the stool specimen by sucking the specimen in and out of the transfer pipette. Using the same transfer pipette, dispense 200 microliters of liquid stool in a clean centrifuge tube. Using a pipette with disposable tip, add 1,000 microliters of pre-treatment reagent, R1, to the centrifuge tube. Homogenize again by drawing in and out of the transfer pipette. Then mix using a vortex-type mixer until a homogeneous medium is obtained. Note: it is essential that all proportions of the sample be uniformly mixed with pre-treatment reagent R1. The R1 pre-treatment reagents of VIDAS C. difficile GDH assay and VIDAS C. difficile Toxin A and B are the same. Do not use any other pre-treatment reagent. In cases where semi-solid stools consist more of liquid than of solid, the sample preparation procedure may be performed using the instructions provided for liquid stools. If the specimen is solid or a semi-solid stool, process these specimens using the following steps. To ensure the precise transfer of 200 milligrams or semi-solid or solid stool, use a gauge tube. The gauge tube can be made by dispensing 200 microliters of distilled water into a clean centrifuge tube using a pipette with a disposable tip. This tube will be used as a gauge tube to compare the correct volume is being used. Vigorously homogenize the stool sample using a wooden applicator stick. Transfer 200 milligrams of stool, equivalent to the volume in place in the gauge tube, into a new clean centrifuge tube identified as the sample tube. Note: discard the gauge tube after transferring each of the solid and semi-solid stool specimens. Next, add 1,000 microliters of pre-treatment reagent R1 to the sample tube using a pipette with a disposable tip. Emulsify the stool sample using the applicator stick, and then mix using a vortex-type mixer until the sample appears homogeneous. It is essential that all portions of the sample be uniformly mixed with pre-treatment reagent R1. Once the specimens have been prepared, place the tubes in the centrifuge. Centrifuge for 5 minutes at 2 to 25 degrees Celsius at a minimum of 12,000 G. Remove the specimens from the centrifuge and avoid mixing. You will notice a separation of the specimen. The top layer of supernatant will be used for testing. Note, if particulate matter or lipid material remain at the surface of the supernatant after centrifugation, collect the sample below the surface layer. Using a pipette with a disposable tip, collect 300 microliters of supernatant and transfer it to the VIDAS C difficile Toxin A and B test strip. Note, processed specimen supernatant may be stored up to 48 hours at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius before testing. After 48 hours, processed specimens must be discarded. Once the strip has been inoculated, proceed to load onto the VIDAS instrument. Program the C. difficile Toxin A and B assay into the VIDAS instrument according to the user manual and laboratory protocol. Insert the test strips and spurs into the instrument. Check to make sure the color labels with the assay code on the spurs and the reagent strips match. Initiate the assay as directed in the user manual. The assay will complete in approximately 75 minutes. The test value is calculated by the instrument for each sample, and an interpretation of positive, negative, or equivocal is given. At the end of the run, discard the used strips and spurs into the appropriate biohazard waste for your lab.